to the Equestrian Experience, a show where we talk about what happens behind the rosettes and what we've tried so you don't have to. In a world first, we and our guests will be openly sharing what we know from our extensive equestrian experience. This includes our exclusive access to global experts such as high-performance national vets, coaches, farriers, and even brands. If you're new here, consider subscribing. We're your hosts, Amanda Ross and Bex Mason, and today we're talking to a rider who I've known since we were much younger, Shaun Dillon. Welcome, Shaun, to our podcast. And hey, Bex, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good.
Hi, Amanda and Bex.
Hi, Shaun. Really great to have you on. I can't wait to tell everyone what your story is about.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on. I'm really looking forward to it.
It should be great. I think we've got three slightly different time zones here. So I'm in Melbourne, and then Shaun, you've moved back to Perth, yeah?
Yep, I have.
And we've got Bex in the UK. So now, Shaun, we're going to start off with where you and I first met. So obviously both Australian and both event riders, and we were just discussing that it must have been way back in the day when you were a working pupil for my, very close friend Megan Jones. And you said to me it was what? Where was it again? We're in a Cove horse trials?
Well, I think, if I remember correctly, you came down up or across from Victoria to do the We're in a Cove event, and then you stayed on for Adelaide 3-day event. So I think you were there at Megan's for about a month or so, maybe.
Yeah, we were there for a while. It was actually really fun. God, that was a long time ago, wasn't it?
Go on. How long ago?
That would be 2001.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
It was a fair old stretch ago, and I'm sure
was
so much has happened and changed in that time.
Wow.
Absolutely. So Shaun, tell us a little bit about where you started and how you got into horses and eventing.
Well, I didn't exactly grow up in the mecca of horsey communities. I grew up on a wheat and sheep farm, basically in the middle of nowhere in the far eastern wheat belt of Western Australia. And I don't think there would have been a horse for 100 kilometres around me, but Mum just said from the time I was 2 or 3 years old, I just had this obsession with horses, and every book and magazine had saddles drawn on anything that resembled a horse. And somehow, found somebody that was doing riding lessons, and then went on to buying a 12-hand pony out of the Elders Weekly, which is a little farming newspaper type thing in Western Australia. And then, the progression of pony club, and then competitions, and then, pretty much avoiding school like the plague to get to more competitions, and then, set myself on the path for the illustrious career of being a professional equestrian, as we all know how well that works out for us all. But that's me in a nutshell, really, with where I started and where it all came from.
So that's interesting that your background, you didn't come from a particularly horsey background at all, really, and it's just been a love for horses and an addiction that's come through that's kind of speared you on to be where you are now, and to be able to go through all the stories of eventing, and you've evented up to 4-star. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah. And scarily enough, talking of how time goes by, we had recently had the Woolloomooloo 3-day event over here, so there's a bit of memorabilia going around on social media, and somebody tagged me in a post. What was that? 2002, I think it was, of me doing the old 3-star, what's now 4-star, at Woolloomooloo 3-day event on my dear old horse Baruna Boy. But I quickly did the maths on that being 19 years ago and how old I would have been, and did think to myself it was quite insane that I was let loose on a 4-star at that age with. But it did actually terrify me to think that I did go around with, ignorance is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
I couldn't agree more. I wonder how I went to the Olympics in 2000 when I was 26, and I'm like, I know so much more now. I really wish I could go now, because I'm sure I'm a better rider, and I'm sure I've got so much more knowledge. But it's like you just take what you've got and off you go. It is amazing what you can do, isn't it? And then you turn around and think to yourself, How did I even know how to do that? Like, just pulled that
I
out of
know.
God knows where.
I think it's all kind of just a natural ability with the horses, though, isn't it? I think that's what's amazing about the riding and the equestrian paths that we go down is actually we do a lot of it on feel and natural instinct. And even as a young competitor, you go out there and you can actually get away. Maybe you have less fear. But then as you grow older, I suppose we gain experience and knowledge. We put that in with our natural instinct or our natural abilities. And that's, I suppose, how we grow and get even better. So, yeah, your chances may come around again, guys.
But at least we can be old in this sport, like really old. And how did you get into the eventing side? Like, how did you gain the experience? So obviously, you're a horse mad kid. And I want to say, actually, Bex, what you were just saying then, if you love horses, you just find a way, don't you? And like the amount of people that you hear about who were those horse mad kids that didn't come from a horsey family and how they ever decided they loved horses was, a question for anyone. So obviously, super passionate about it and you wanted to learn. So you've worked for a fair few people to get some experience. What was that like? Who were they? What was it like? What did you learn?
I did. I worked for Megan Jones. When I was quite young, I think I was about 17. I spent a year with her in Adelaide, and then I came back home to WA, and then some time with, quite a bit of time with Shane and Nikki Rose, and then to Stuart Tinney. So they've been very lucky to work with the likes of those guys. They're just, invaluable opportunities to gain the experience and be immersed in their system and their businesses and the way they prepare and manage and do all the phenomenal things they do. So, really lucky and, great experience.
How do they all differ? So what did you learn? I mean, obviously knowing all of them from being my friends competing, how would you say as a working pupil, what did you learn that was different from each one?
Yeah, it's really interesting when you think about it like that. The one common theme amongst them was just a dogged determination of getting to the end result. Megan, she was always sort of looking for new things new ideas and really open to, different therapies for the horses or different equipment or different ways of doing things. He's, just a man that I don't think there's a man on this earth that works as hard as what Shane does. He's just very systematic about how he does things and keeps things quite simple. And then Stuart, I always think Stuart looks like a technician on the surface, but when you actually get to understand the concepts and the principles behind how he trains, he's, it's just those simple basics and, the foundations. And that's what I can say about all three of those guys is that it was just really good horsemanship and was what it comes down to. And that constant, drive that they wanted to be better and better. And they never, took any, never rested on their laurels of anything. They just were always striving to be better. And that was, but three very different people to work for.
And I suppose from all three of those top riders, you've taken a little bit from each of them and put it into your horse knowledge and how your equestrian experience, shall I say, has gone. I mean, I know that you've actually got a couple of your own homebreds now, don't you, that you compete on? That you've taken back to Perth, is that correct?
Yep. Two lovely little horses I had a good mare, Kitaroa Satoria, that injured herself. And I absolutely adored that mare. And then while she was injured, I was lucky enough to breed some foals out of her. And whilst I knew they were nice horses, I'm becoming pleasantly surprised that they're turning into really good little horses at the moment. And so I'm thoroughly enjoying riding them around. You sort of don't realise how content you can be riding around the 1 and 2 stars when you're sort of hungry to be back up at the higher levels again.
Yeah.
When you're on just nice little horses like that just, yeah, it's really satisfying just having them come up the grades and, yeah, feeling them grow into lovely horses and mature as they, come along.
And knowing them from the very beginning as well. And as I think you said before, you had no expectations from them. You didn't go out to breed superstars, but just to be on something you've bred. And you said you're not hugely into your breeding, but you just enjoyed that mare so much that it was more of a kind of momentum. It's just a great story, because I've kind of done the same. I had a mare that I jumped to who used to win loads, and she only jumped up to a certain level, but she owed me absolutely nothing. And we kind of went, oh, you know what, we won't ever breed, but we've ended up breeding one from her just because she owed us nothing, and she's there. And yeah, I've got a lovely 2-year-old now, which I'm really excited to come out and maybe start competing in the future. And he'll be what he will be. I've got no expectations of him. So I did really like that little story of your homebreds that you had there.
Yeah, I have to admit, I can't take any credit for any science or any mad recipes that went into breeding them. It was pure good luck and guidance from a very knowledgeable friend back here with picking out stallions, but I can't take the credit for the input of how they turned out as far as breeding cocktails go. But yeah.
So, Shaun, tell us a little bit about the good horses that you've had. So, you had GV Anzac, who I remember was a super cute bay, and then also Another Biscuit, which I'll tell you a funny story. When we bought Diesel from Shane, Another Biscuit and Diesel's microchips were completely mixed up. And so every time I went to a show, they'd beep him and they're like, Another Biscuit? And I'm like, Duckavalley Diesel? And they're like, no, hang on. And Nikki kept saying, oh, here, I'll give you Another Biscuit and have Diesel back. That's absolutely fine. So I remember. So
beautiful horse. Just a very quirky, sensitive character, but he was a really cool horse. And GV Anzac, which Olivia Bunn or Skellen owned, he's probably one of my favourites of all time. He was unfortunately, he had the ability to be a rock star, but yeah, he didn't always like to put his best foot forward where it counted. So I don't think he ever got to quite be the superstar he could have been, but I really enjoyed that horse. And then what I've had the mentioned Kitaroa Satoria, the mother of the 2 I bred. I think she went up to 3-star level before she injured herself. Mm-hmm. And then I guess the memorable ones are the ones like old Baruna Boy, which I would have had when I was at Megan's when I first met you, Amanda. That he came as a 5-year-old off the track horse. Managed to give me the opportunity with absolutely no knowledge whatsoever to kamikaze my way up the grades to 4-star at an early age like I did. But I think when you're on horses that are, good jumpers and as careful as that, really lucky to have the opportunity of a horse like him to get me up the grade and look after me with the lack of experience and knowledge that no doubt went behind it. But
And how did you sort of break your way into it? So obviously you grow up in the bush and there's, you don't have a horsey family. You need to somehow get some support. Did you have any sort of breakthroughs there that managed to give you a hand to, to start up?
Yeah, well, initially, Ali Alsama, or is now Ali G, she sort of helped make the connection with Megan to get me over to go spend a year with Megan. So that was my first sort of break into the with the big kids, I guess. And then I had a a good sponsorship deal came from my auntie, who's a nun, believe it or not.
Oh, I've heard this story. Can we backtrack? Tell me this story. This is absolutely insane. This is so great.
But this must be when I was about 17 or 18. We had pretty full-on family tragedy, and Auntie Bridget, who's not backwards and coming forwards, sort of waltzed in one day and announced that the horses had to go, and Mum couldn't be running around taking me to horse shows every weekend, and that fad of riding these horses was all over. And
so
then
you were basically told that you can't ride anymore. The horses are going. You've got to find a different.
Well, I think it was a strong suggestion, but
yeah.
If you know me, Bex, taking orders and being told what to do is probably red rag to a bull.
Yeah.
But no, then Auntie Bridget happened to turn up at Wooroloo to watch me competing and saw what it was all about, and had a complete turnabout, and next minute was waltzing into Ron Bates' office in Newcastle Street in Perth, demanding that Bates Saddles sponsored her 17-year-old nephew to go out eventually.
Come on, Auntie Bridget.
Go, Auntie Nun.
Taking this upon herself, and I remember getting a lovely Bates Caprilli dressage saddle and a Bates Maestro dressage saddle out of that, and then from
that must have been an absolute dream for you.
Oh man,
it started to kick off.
Cool. And then what's been even more lovely about that is that then has turned on to a long-term thing that sort of stayed a part of the Bates family of riders, and so that was a really cool thing. That sort of, and then with that come all the cool stuff when you're involved with a big company like that, to be able to do the photo shoots and the video shoots and all the things that come from that. So that was a huge break, and dear old Auntie Bridget, I've got to thank for that.
That's a fantastic story. I think good on a nun for popping in there. And no, there's no way you could say no to a nun, could you?
No, I often think back, it would have been where Ron would have been able to go with saying no. I don't think he had any choice, but
what a great beginning, and still same sponsored by the Bates family, which is just amazing. So that's you've got to take a chance, haven't you? You just got to take a chance.
Well,
you do,
or just send a nun in for it, but yeah.
We might borrow Auntie Bridget if that's okay, or one of her friends. Yeah. So any other memorable equestrian moments? I do hear that you may have run the Hot to Trot float at the Sydney Mardi Gras. Tell us about that.
Oh, that was so much fun. That came about I'm a gay man, and sort of the I know the coming out thing is always was quite confronting, as it is for majority of gay people. And must have been about 5 years after I'd come out. I remember just thinking, Equestrian Australia hasn't really, there's nothing to represent the equestrian community at Mardi Gras, and I sort of thought it was a good opportunity to sort of promote the diversity of the sport, equestrian sports, and to hopefully,
so tell us, you had this idea. How did you get that idea actually to having a float? What was the first phone calls you made to say, I've got this idea, we're doing this?
Yeah, well, it happened really quickly. It was amazing the amount of people that came on board with the idea. Fiona Hughes, who would all know from Sit Tight Radio over here, she was one of the first people I spoke to, and she loved the idea of it. And then, Anne Keeling and Jenny Bennett and a few of those girls, Lauren Balcombe, all came on board. And next minute, it was just turning into something bigger than Ben-Hur. And there's so much support from, the equestrian community with sponsorship and donations, and just so much fun. The ironic part about it is I think there's only myself and about 2 other gay people on the float. Everyone else was just wanted to be a part of Mardi Gras. Great fun. Though trying to get horsey people coordinated to, do a few basic dance moves on a float up Oxford Street, turned into more of an exercise of herding cats.
Yeah.
Than anything
Sounds
glamorous.
fun.
No, it was so much fun.
Well, it's just a really inspirational story, isn't it? Because I think equestrians across the board, all around the world. I mean, there is quite a strong, probably gay community, but I think everybody is so supportive of it all, and it's all just kind of the norm. But I think for yourself to bring that out in the community and be like, look, see, it's cool. Our equestrian sport is, so accepting of this. So come into the equestrian world. I think it's great promotion for anybody that wants to get involved in horses, and to realise that you don't have to have the horsey background and to be able to become part of such a cool community that's going to be so supportive as well throughout your life.
Yeah, and that's it. You don't take it for granted with how accepting the horsey community is. It's very diverse, and male men and women compete on an equal playing field. And then with that, just the levels of diversity. I definitely. Well, I've been grounded in the sport for so long that it is very easy to take it. For granted of how diverse it is. And that was the good thing, like I mentioned earlier about, I remember how hard it was for me and the anxiety and everything that went with it. But then when I came out and then realising just how accepting everyone was really quite a beautiful time of my life, to be perfectly honest. I still remember that, when I came out and then, sort of told a few close people and sort of networked a bit until, it was out there. Everyone knew that the rumour mill started up. And I remember going to an event at SIAC, and I just sort of I don't know what I braced. I just thought I was just so nervous about going to that event with everyone knowing. It was really confronting at the time. And then, I just remember sitting on the grass after the show jumping, and it was almost like, just end up a big group of people, and, made
breathe.
Sure that, everyone was okay with it, which was really cool. And that was a big part of the Hot to Trot float, the Mardi Gras float, was trying to get that message out there as to everyone that it is a really accepting community, and that, the anxiety I went through was, once I'd sort of, come out, realised was completely unnecessary. And so hopefully, and I think quite a few people, younger people that, whether it was off the back of that or not, had sort of come out and sort of came and spoke to me, and I thought that was made it all worthwhile.
So you were an inspiration for those younger equestrians that were having worries or anxieties, and I think
that or a bad role model. No,
no, never. Never.
Shaun, while we're on that topic, I have a real interest in some mental health and wellness and psychology, and I know we were talking about that you've had diagnosed with ADHD, and I think on this podcast, what I really enjoy about us all being able to talk about, I mean, basically it's about equestrian, but we're all people at the end of the day, and I feel, I'm not sure what you think, but horses are such therapists for us in so many ways. And how did you discover that you had ADHD? And were there things in your writing, was it difficult to remember tests or certain things that you now realise were for that? And then on the other hand, have the horses provided you with some therapy and helped you along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess maybe if I can backtrack, to where that sort of all landed for me, or how it's all come about. I probably didn't have my childhood and early adolescent years weren't ideal. My father was alcoholic and probably not the greatest human being going, and and then so through school and all the rest, found all that quite hard, and what later turned out to be undiagnosed ADHD. But then my father actually committed suicide when I was 17. So then came the, following on from that was, quite an emotional struggle. And, I think, with that, the, the depression and, a real struggle there, off and on, coping with the lead up to that and that, that happening. So then, I kind of had the ADHD thing had been brought up a few times, but it kind of presented itself, as me just being basically a bit of a shithead, like, always in trouble, always up to mischief,
Yeah.
and, the attention span of a rice bubble, basically.
Maybe I've got it.
And so that's only been the last couple of years that I've actually, been diagnosed with that, and that has just been life changing for me. Looking back now on the struggles I had with my writing, particularly with school, I just used to sort of think, you just aren't a great person, or you're not good enough. And then you just realize there's a bit of a chemical imbalance there when you discover that and have that, helped out. The difference that made to my life has been incredible. Like, I went through school just, failing everything, really disruptive, basically doing anything I could to get out of school to ride my horses because that's all I wanted to do. And then with that thinking, that my academic ability was pretty poor. But the horses, that's where they were a huge lifeline. That's all I wanted to do. And that's where I was my, where that kept me really driven and all the rest. But back to what I was saying about the ADHD stuff. Since I sort of done something about that, found myself, believe it or not, getting accepted into starting my first semester of law. So that's been a real...
I love that. Yeah, I love that. So you've done a full circle from not thinking that you're not very good at going the educational route to actually now studying law. This is incredible.
It's not about not being smart. It's about how it's portrayed, how it gets to you. It's just getting the information in the right way, and if it's in a different way, it doesn't mean you're not smart.
No, that's what I was at a bit of a crossroads last year of where and what to I wanted to really do with the writing, keeping the career in horses going or what. And I was sort of told about this course that Murdoch University offered, like an accelerated acceptance course, to go off and do that. So, because I had no school grades or anything. So I went off and lo and behold, got accepted. And so now here I am doing my first semester of law at Murdoch. And so I'm flat out trying to learn all the law stuff as well as catch up on what I probably should have learned in year 8. But
Plenty of time for that.
Really enjoying it. And it's, that's been nice to, now come back to really enjoying the horses again because, I just think it's...
how you can have a complete career change but be able to interlink the two as well. It's just incredible. I mean, oh my gosh, what an inspiration. I couldn't imagine going back to school and trying to study, and I've kind of, would think about doing something like that, but either I wouldn't be brave enough or, but maybe you're giving me a little bit of a lift. Maybe I want a change of careers too. I'm going to be a doctor.
Do it.
So Shaun, you've been in New South Wales and you've done the writing thing, and also, I mean, you're coaching. I know it's great that it's amazing you're so vulnerable with this, and I'm sure that this is really going to resonate with a lot of people. And it's being vulnerable like this that really lets people realize that everybody's got a story and everybody can help each other. And if we can help just one person by being open with our life's sort of circumstances. So after going to New South Wales and then, becoming, a 4-star rider. Now, you did a lot of coaching as well, because I remember seeing you out there coaching, and you always had this band of really great, happy people around you. And you taught a lot of kids. So did you find that you had a bit of a niche that really resonated with a lot of kids?
Yeah. First of all, I really like coaching and teaching, and whether it's the adult riders or, competitive riders. But when I was in Sydney, I ran a lot of school holiday camps, and that proved to be really popular. And sort of managed to. I saw like a bit of a gap in the market there, from like the kids going from a riding school to wanting their first horse, and that help nurture them through to that next stage. And that proved to be really popular. And so I sort of did a lot of that, and I think quite a few people came into the sport off the back of that, which is nice and really enjoyable.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, especially the school holiday stuff when you've got the kids there, and they've had many of them, like some of them had never ridden before, or are they all done a little bit?
Yeah, we're a mixed bag. Like some were, had ridden, some, could probably been on a horse, but that was about it. But it was more about the, a lot of those were city kids, so getting out in the bush, out in the country of, I was an hour out of Sydney, and just we go to the beach with the horses, all the cool stuff, and
that's really cool.
Just the farm life, and the whole experience. It was, I think, and when you're an overgrown kid, you have just as much fun as they do. So it was easy.
That sounds fantastic. Sounds really cool. Now you're back in WA.
I am, yeah.
So what spiked the move to go back home again?
Well, it turned out to be a lucky one. I got back here just a couple of months before COVID hit.
And you're free, and we're so all locked down.
I know. Moved back to the hive of activity. Good old Perth.
And for our listeners that aren't from Australia, can you let us know how long did it take you to get back to Perth? Because I asked the question earlier, do you fly the horses? Because I know it is quite a long way. How far is it to get the horses?
We drove the horses back, so that was a 4-day trip, start to finish.
Wow.
And that's some pretty solid driving every day with, some breaks in between for the horses to, get them off and so forth. But I think they tend to travel.
4-day trip, 12 hours driving every day. That's quite a long old trip. It's not just like, I'm just going to pop home and go and see my mum.
And what do you see along the way, Shaun, when you drive through the middle part? Explain to our international listeners what you actually, there's no villages, is it?
No, there's a lot of nothing. So basically from Sydney, we drove down to Megan Jones's in Adelaide, and that was about a 10-hour drive, I guess. No, longer than that, 16-hour drive rather, and stayed overnight there and gave the horses a good break. And then from Adelaide, we drove straight across to the WA South Australia border, and don't ask me how long that took, but that was the second leg. And then obviously while we're doing that, we're stopping every 4 to 5 hours and getting the horses off the float, getting the heads down for a graze and a pick and some water and a drink and all the rest. So, and then through from the border, we stayed there. So obviously at Megan's, we had very good facilities. At the WA border, they've got just some portable panel yards at the back of the service station there, but all quite safe and well thought out.
Yeah.
And then from the border through to Kalgoorlie, where the horses have to, wait. You have to wait for their liver fluke, quarantine test results, whatever you call them. Sorry, come through. And the facility in Kalgoorlie is very, very good. That's the DPI have put a lot of effort into making that a pretty first class facility. And then from Kalgoorlie, it's through to Perth. But as far as stopping, there's plenty of places to stop and get the horses off on the way over. But as far as there's not too many designated facilities out there.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to get stuck with a blown tyre part of the way, would you?
No, or run out of fuel 30 kilometres from the WA border either.
That would be a schoolboy error.
Very glad for a can of fuel that was packed for an incident like that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, can't imagine anything more terrifying than being.
I haven't admitted that to anyone until just then, because Holly Lewis, my co-driver that came over with me, she was asleep while all that happened. So I managed to get to the border without Holly even knowing about that we'd run out of fuel.
So you did. Sorry, I thought you were joking about that. I thought you were joking about that. You actually did run out of fuel.
You actually did.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I did.
Seriously. Yeah, good job for the jerry can in the back. So you eventually made it home to your family. How is it being back at home and being back with your mum?
Yeah, it's really good. It was 14 years over in New South Wales, and you just realise you miss out on a lot. So it's good. Like, mum was getting older and so forth, and family and that. I've missed out on a lot on kids and nephews and stuff growing up while I'd been away. So it's really nice to be back and to be able to be a part of all those things that you miss out on when you're on the other side of the country.
And have a bit of your mum's homemade cooking.
Yeah. Okay.
She's the Country Women's Association queen of baking and cooking.
Pretty much, yeah. She comes to a horse show or anything like that, and can turn the camp into looking like an industrial kitchen from the CWA cookbook of homemade sausage rolls and the sponge cakes and all the rest. So I just need to put a muzzle on me to stop my horses ending up with sway backs.
You'd have to wait till after you've ridden to eat. Oh my God, that sounds amazing. Oh, too funny. And so now you're back in WA and you've got the horses back there again. Is there much of, what's the difference between competing in New South Wales and, Sydney is a really hustle bustle competition area. So what's the difference being back in Perth?
Well, first of all, the standard of competitions over here, they're just beautifully run. Like the committee's put a lot of effort into really putting on a good show. The courses are always beautifully presented. And they're strongly supported, not as much so at the higher level. But yeah, the events are great. There's enough of them. But I certainly miss having the likes of the Shanes and the Stuarts and the likes of yourself, Amanda, at a competition where you can ask a question, or if there's anything you're not sure about with how something's going to ride on the course. I certainly miss having that calibre of people about. But apart from that, it's mostly pretty good.
And you're enjoying the horses, and so now little change of pace, studying law, 2 horses, and still coaching as well over there?
Yeah. Yep. So that's still a work in progress, the juggle of making all that work. But I think somehow it is at the moment. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure you'll make it work. I'm just so impressed about, studying law. But like, you know what it's like when you're a kid. I grew up absolutely just wanting to do horses. And I mean, sometimes it takes you a little bit longer to say, you know, yeah, I do want to go back and study. And I actually have found something that I'm really passionate about apart from horses, or, you know, something that you sort of find you've now got the brain space and time to study. Can I ask how old you are starting law?
37.
Probably, I would say, the right age of life experience and maturity, Shaun.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but it's quite funny. I find myself, I still find it really, really intimidating. Going to the workshops and the tutorials and even the live lectures. I just feel like it intimidates the bejesus out of me. But I've actually started really liking it to trotting into the dressage arena at an Adelaide or a Melbourne 3-day event, and that kind of that sort of pressure you put on yourself, and it's amazing what you learn from what your life experiences are, and how you can actually adapt them to other areas that make where you feel under that sort of pressure. So that's been quite cool to be able to think and apply that a little bit, and been good.
That's really interesting. And yeah, it does. When you think about all of the stuff that we do as, you know, competitive equestrians, we're constantly under a sort of an internal pressure. I mean, whether or not you have pressure from owners as well, or sponsors or what have you, but we've got to be super organized. We've got to, we've got responsibility to look after the welfare of another horse. We've got to be able to be sportsmanlike. Like, there is a lot, isn't there? And you just do it because it's your sport. But like, it's so interesting listening to what you're saying about how suddenly all of these things can be, transferred into a completely different aspect of your life.
Yeah, it really is. Because I think sometimes it's easy to think, with the horses and everything that you do with them, that if you were to go off and do something else, that that's been 20 years of wasted, time. But it's amazing how much of what you learn is applicable to other areas of life. I'm coming into this with little to no academic background. But
what I love is that you're challenging yourself again, and that seems to be a bit of a thread throughout your life, is that you've had these challenges and things thrown at you, and you've risen to them and gone, okay, I'll eat that up and I'll be success in that. And so you've given yourself another huge challenge here. Said, I'm going to change my career. I'm going to, well, not necessarily change your career, but I'm going to delve into this part of life which I've never tried before. And it's almost like you're thriving off that fear factor, because you know that you can overcome it with the other things that you've overcome in your life so far. So I think for our listeners, that is super inspirational. And it makes me want to go out and kind of just try something a little bit different.
I think it's cool. But I mean, I think like everything in life is it's all relevant. Like what we learn in the horses is applicable to other areas of life. It's amazing. Like like learning more and more about the law stuff. The similarities, they're all there. It's still there's principles, and I'm getting really stuck here on what I'm saying, but basically the mindset and the work ethic and what it takes, in the horsey world is just exactly, finding it, transfers over to learning all about law. And I sometimes find myself in those tutorials and workshops, and you see some of the other people looking completely overwhelmed, especially the younger ones, with a task, and then to you it just seems normal because you kind of have already negotiated that mental hurdle of what 37 times over at a horse show or something like that.
So you've already climbed that mountain, but in a different aspect of your life, and you're just putting that into learning in the office and learning through law. So finally, do you have any tips for any youth equestrians out there, like to improve their skills, if they want to move up the levels and they're aiming for the first 1 or 2 star event?
Oh, look, I think the important thing is, to have the right role models, and learn about the system that makes them tick. Like learn from other people, but sort of have that understanding of what the basic foundations of horse riding are, of our eventing is, of good dressage and good jumping, our rhythm and balance and straightness and all those sort of really basic foundations. And then rather than getting so starstruck about the accolades that go with, the role model, look at how they, put all those good foundations into a system that leads to the glory that makes you want to aspire to be like them, I guess.
That's really cool, because it's not really about as a person, what you've done. It's who you are, isn't it? So you can look at them and say, oh, they won this and they won that, but it's all the behind the scenes stuff. And hey, in our sport, I reckon we can be roosted a feather duster so quickly. It's so humbling as well, isn't it? So you got to be a good person, otherwise it catches you pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's interesting looking at the likes of, you watch Amanda, Shane Rose, Stuart Tinney, and Megan Jones at a competition, and they're all, Amanda looks quite different to Shane Rose on a horse, but 40, but all the same principles. You guys are always at the top of the leaderboard, and yeah, whilst you might look like you have different styles or so forth, it all comes down to the good old basics, doesn't it? And that's, the way you guys have made that work in a system that's made you guys all as successful as you have.
Oh, look, I think it works for everyone. All three of us here, we've all sort of had to make our own systems and make them work. And, as well, Bex, I mean, I think we're both pretty impressed with the journey you've taken, and going back there and, adding an extra string to your bow. The law degree is going to be so fulfilling.
Well, let's hope. Yeah, early days yet, but it'll be a slow churn. But I was pretty impressed with what you girls are up to with this podcast. I've been following it. It's such a cool concept, and I love how openly you guys talk to each other, and like learning about what Bex gets up to on the other side of the world, and then listening to you guys bring the similarities into it.
It really has been a blast so far.
Yeah.
And when we first got to know that we were going to be speaking to you, I was like, looked you up a little bit more on Facebook and stuff. And then Amanda spoke to me about you, and I've just loved your story. And I think this podcast, that's what it's all about, is be able to bring people's stories together, because there's so many threads that run through the equestrian world that give people kind of a safe space for their mind, for learning. And you're proof that you've come from a non-equestrian background to be able to surround yourself by horses and what they kind of get us through and what they help us achieve, and just how amazing is our equestrian community.
100%. It's a good place, a good sport to be in, and it's a great sport.
Yeah, we're also blessed, aren't we? It's so fantastic. Lucky.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good time to wrap up. But thank you so much, Shaun, and Bex, of course, my co-host extraordinaire. And this has been the Equestrian Experience with myself, Amanda Ross, my co-host Bex Mason, and this episode's special guest, Shaun Dillon. To send in your questions for up-and-coming episodes, enter our competitions, and also access our other episodes, be sure to visit the Equestrian Experience podcast.com. And you can also follow us at Amanda Ross Equestrian and Bex Mason Show Jumping. So up until next time, have a great equestrian experience, and see you then.
See you.
See you guys.